Welcome to The Stand Up, a new series where we bring together industry leaders from the worlds of project management and change to share their stories, insights, and lessons learned. Inspired by the format of a daily stand up, each interview will explore three key areas: what they've accomplished, what challenges they're facing, and what they're focused on next. Through this unique approach, we'll uncover practical wisdom and thought-provoking ideas to help you navigate the complexities of your own projects and initiatives. I'm delighted to be joined today by a friend, former colleague, and veteran of the project management world, Suzanne Thurlow. Suzanne's worked her way up through the frontline roles of project delivery to become head of change at a global insurer. And she's just recently moved on from that role to take up a new position as an interim operations director. Suzanne, it's great to have you join us today. Perhaps let's kick off with that starting point of a project from your past and the lessons that you took from it.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for having me on this series. I'm really pleased to talk to you about change. I know it's something we both are very passionate about. I think the example that I would use is actually, it was a really positive one, and it was a really large scale program of not only technology transformation, but also how the organization operated as well. And I was involved with one of the core work streams on that program. So I was running it as a project within the program. What really struck home with me in terms of why it was so successful is we had a fantastic program manager. I still kind of revert back to, what would they do if they were in this situation? But I think fundamentally it was the structure that he placed across the program itself, holding the sponsors to account, which I think is really, really important. I think, people talk about sponsorship and project management and programs, but actually having an active sponsor who really understands their role and has the respect of the program and the project team, and vice versa as well, and are very clear on what it is that they are expecting. That worked really well. And I think everybody was very clear on what their roles were. There was no stepping over each other. There was no, you always get these grey areas of, oh, are you doing this? Oh, I thought I was doing it. And everybody kind of, we all look at each other. So for me, that was a huge learn. And I think taking that into, the projects, and obviously sort of into the head of change role that I've just moved out of, it's really about the roles and responsibilities and the clarity of that, but also having a really great team and having a team that are passionate and believe in what we're trying to achieve. Because I think people come in, they do projects and they kind of think, I'm doing this project, it's brilliant, but I don't really know and understand the bigger context. And I think that's really important, that the team are aware of, yes, we're doing this, and the benefits of doing this are, X, Y, and Z, or the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. So I think summarizing that, I would say really well-structured team, strong program leadership, strong active sponsorship, and people being really clear on the outcome in terms of why they're actually doing this project in the first place.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting. I mean, sponsorship is a really important topic, I think, within project delivery, and as I'm sure you've had varying levels of engagement from sponsors over your career. And I think what you were saying there about really understanding the why, I think that comes from the sponsor. The sponsor is the one because that's who you're really delivering for, isn't it? And who you're working with. I just wondered if we can dig into that a little bit more. Then, what did that sponsor, what did that engagement look like from the sponsor that really made the difference in that program?
I think they actually wanted the change in the first place. I think sometimes people do projects because they see, all right, this is something we should be doing. Whereas I think this was a fundamentally change in the dial program in terms of what the outcome was going to be. So I think they were really key in standing behind the change and also being a real advocate for it across the organization. And it also brought, the old adage of it's technology in the business, and it brought that together, and was a real, I think, focus on how those are complementary to each other rather than kind of like driving forces against each other. So I think for me, the thing that really stood out in terms of that sponsorship was the need and the desire to want to do the change, being an advocate for that, being very communicative and transparent with it, with the whole project team, and also across the organisation with town halls and things as well, and really understanding what the role of being a sponsor meant, so that people, you know, had the ability to go and ask them questions. You know, if we had a scope question, for example, we knew that because they were really invested in it, that obviously was fundamental to them, that we were working on the right things for them as well.
Okay, and it's one of the point I wanted to pick up. You talked about the program manager being the other key person in this successful project, and you said about strong program management, and you know, you do get a range of project managers as well,
Yes.
or program managers within this. There's the kind of the dictatorial end of things, which could be classed as strong. And then the people who don't set the boundaries, and that creates, you know, as many problems. I guess what does good, strong program management look like for you?
Yeah,
Examples.
I think it's that leadership element. It's somebody who is very clear, who provides clarity, who is well respected as well. So, you know, you get some people who will come in and they'll manage a program, but you know, they're very hands off, which is absolutely fine in some instances. But I think having the that structure was you know, really important, and something that he put in place. Knowing where you stood, I think, was really good. You know, there was success was celebrated, but also, you know, it was, you were also very aware and conscious that you wanted to deliver on the milestones. You wanted to make sure you were meeting the timeframes that had been set out by, you know, the plan that we'd all agreed together, because you didn't want to let that person down. And I think that's a fundamental part of almost the trust that people build as a program team. And when you have a really strong program leader or a project leader, that trust it becomes a lot easier to gain, and also to work with. So there's that, you know, you feel that accountability, that you want to work well for that person, and I think that's really important, is you know, having that team that you can make people feel like that, and being on the receiving end of it as well, that you feel that you're giving something that's really important to that sponsor and that program leader.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you often think of that program leader when you're in your own, or have done in your own projects. And so, what, you know, if you were to just very quickly summarize the learnings, the lessons, the things that you've actually implemented as a result of what you learned from that leader, from that program, what would
Of course. Ironically, it was interesting. I'd put together an integration plan where we kind of had a very clear view of, you know, what was needed by our third-party providers, and he actually sent this plan to me after I'd left the organisation, saying, "Oh, do you remember this?" And I mean, that hasn't answered your question in terms of learns, but it was it was a really positive thing for me that he'd still retained that, and kind of had kept it as an artifact that he felt was a good piece of work. And one of those learns was actually, because of that piece of work, I felt was you know, it provided clarity. We got that by actually getting people involved in the meetings, and the third parties were engaged very, very early on. So when you're working with third-party vendors, it's always, you know, they have roadmaps of things, and you know, you're not their only customer. And I think sometimes we all feel, well, of course, why wouldn't you do that for me in 2 weeks' time when I need it? So I think it's being respectful of them as well. And so that's something, you know, for me, is always making sure, what does that engagement look like? What is that kind of plan with people that you don't have huge control or influence over, because they are working to different time agendas sometimes. So that was one of those learns, was early engagement. And I think another learn was people being very clear on the role that they play within the program and the project, and the expectations that are set. So, you know, RAG updates need to be done on a Monday morning, milestone plans need to be done by a Thursday afternoon, ready for that meeting. And so, you know, you weren't going in kind of last minute thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't got this. You know, there was a very clear view of, this is what I expect of you and when. And I think, again, that's something that providing clarity, I talk a lot about clarity, but I think, you know, in a world where there's a lot of ambiguity, and you know, people are very much like, oh, am I doing that? Am I not doing that? I think having that is a real key learn as well.
Okay, great. So if we zoom forward then from the past up to today, what are the projects, the priorities that you've got, the upcoming challenges in terms of delivery for you?
Yeah, so being new into the role, obviously one of my key priorities is getting to know the team, understanding the business in terms of what part of the journey that we're on in our transformation, and really looking at, you know, what does good look like? You know, people have different perceptions of that. So again, it's understanding from the business heads, and you know, what does good delivery mean? So rather than coming in and thinking, oh, you know, that's what I think it would look like, and they're, no, you're way off the mark. So again, it's being very clear on what are the expectations, what are the priorities in terms of the change activity that's underway, and how does that help us achieve our business outcomes and our business strategy that we've got as well. So I would say those are the key priorities at the moment.
Okay. And within project management more generally, there's always blockers, there's always challenges. If you think about, you know, either now or in the past, what do you think are the key blockers or the main blockers to good program or project delivery?
I would say ambiguity of scope.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, everybody starts with, you know, we want a box, and all of a sudden, you know, people are building the box like, oh, but I want a lid that opens, and I want a hinge, and I want it to be blue with, you know, yellow spots. And it's kind of, okay, those things might be absorbable within the current funding or the current team, but they may also fundamentally change what that looks like as well. So I think having scope, and I don't just mean kind of in terms of deliverables and, you know, we need to do X, Y, and Z, but I think the going back to the why. So why are we doing this? So people can understand the bigger context. So I think one of the key blockers sometimes is people going around in circles of, I thought we were doing this. Oh, well, actually, no, that means that. Oh, okay, we'll need to take a step back then, because I think we've done that, you know, perhaps not to how we were expecting. So I think that's one of the key blockers. And I think, you know, as every project professional knows, getting the right people. So managing the balance of people who are SMEs onto your project, and also managing their business as usual role as well, because that will always come first. The business has to always, you know, be the priority. And I think, you know, when you're in a project, you know, that is your world. That's the most important thing. It's like, well, how can that be more important than you giving me a work stream update? So I think sometimes it's that as well, is, you know, having the right resource to be able to support in terms of their subject matter expertise, but also working to understand what time can they give to the project. Because sometimes, you know, people are, oh, I can give you half a day a week, and actually, you know, from the program that I was referencing earlier, we had dedicated SMEs and we backfilled their roles. So, you know, they were embedded and they were ingrained in the program, they lived it and breathed it day to day, and therefore not only did they have skin in the game, but they were huge advocates of change and became the change champions for taking messages back out as well. So I think having your SMEs and your resource profile is super important, but also can be a blocker as well.
Yeah, you know, when you're on a big program, you're normally in that fortunate position of having dedicated SMEs, dedicated resource on the program. How would you deal with that situation though, which happens in smaller projects that you were describing, that where you've got, you know, 30% of someone's time, and
Yeah.
you know, and it doesn't line up with when you need them, and how do you manage those sort of challenges in projects, or how does your team manage those sort of challenges?
I think it's using people's time effectively. So, you know, as a team, if you know that you've got deliverables or milestones that you need that person for, but you know that might cut across, you know, multiple deliverables. It's like, how can you utilize the time that you've got with them to maximize the output from them? So rather than, you know, do they need to come to every team meeting? Is it a case that you can work through the plan and their updates with them, and then you take it in and be the, you know, the voice of their update? And you know, that's sometimes easier said than done. But I think again, it's almost setting out and getting them to set out what the reality is of what they can provide, and also looking at, well, are there other people within their teams that they can delegate some of the project tasks to? Because again, I think there's a piece around building collateral and expertise across teams, not just being reliant on one person who's the work stream lead. So again, it's how can we leverage people's wider teams to help if sometimes that 30% might not be exactly what we need. So it's sometimes being creative with the approach that we take as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the theme that I'm getting, through all three of these questions that I've asked you is clarity, as you said, the sort of clarity around the program leadership and the sponsorship of the program, clarity around expectations with it going into a new role, clarity around how much time you're going to get and how you can best optimize that in the challenges. If I were to ask you, what do you think you do differently, or what approach do you take to really make sure that you nail down that kind of clarity and that in the work that you do? Because it feels like that's your absolute number one you have to get in order to succeed in project delivery.
Yeah. Well, I hope I provide that. People that I work with might be like, no, absolutely not. So there's my expectations of myself as well. I think it's getting the team together. And I think sometimes one of the challenges is those coffee machine chats, which, we all love and we all got like catching up, but it's almost sometimes those can be derailers to the scope. It's almost like, oh, but I saw such and such, in the kitchen, and oh, actually, yeah, we're not doing that now. We're going to do something different instead, or that scope item is now in or out. So I think it's trying to make sure that there's one message that everybody is hearing. So it's sort of hearing it once, and giving people the opportunity to challenge each other as well, because we're a team, we're project professionals, we're not there just as order takers. So I think having that space for people to hear the one message, so it's not, oh, well, my interpretation was this. So again, also getting people to play back, what do you understand from what's been shared, what's your recollection of what the outcomes and the deliverables are, so that again, I think early engagement piece, you can kind of try and mitigate or minimize any challenge around people's misinterpretation or ambiguity over asks of them.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that comes to my mind when I think about this, I completely agree with you around clarity being the absolute cornerstone of good project delivery. But it's asking those questions, but not being attached to the answer of what I heard was this. Is that right? And actually, if they say no, that's a good thing. If they say no, that isn't right, because then you actually get to what the real clarity is that sits underneath it. And I think one of the skills is getting more confident and more able to, particularly when you're talking to a senior stakeholder, to ask those kind of questions and to really delve in to make sure you've really understood, or everyone has really understood what's being asked for is absolutely critical. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. And I think, as you said, the fact about asking questions, I think not being afraid to ask why. So why are we doing this? Why do we need it? Why now, I think, is a really important question, because everybody wants everything now. And I think, sometimes people see theirs as the most important, and, they might not appreciate that there's a large portfolio of change activity happening. So again, I think, not being afraid, and as you say, having the confidence to ask those questions as well.
I loved your point, and it is so true. I said, when I asked you about the stakeholder, why that sponsor was so engaged, you said because they actually wanted to do the project. The amount of time you have a sponsor who doesn't really want to do the project, and I think as a project manager, it's our job then to go, well, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this project if you're not engaged and wanting to do it? And I think, but again, as a junior project manager, that's a really hard thing to do. As you get senior, you start to get a bit more confidence around that, don't you? But it happens so often that, yeah. Okay, that's brilliant, Suzanne. Like, to finish off now, we've got a couple of quick fire questions. Just gonna put to you a bit more of a fun element here. So I'm just going to run through these. Let's see what you come up with. So we all love different software to help make our jobs easier. What's your kind of go-to or favorite software app that makes your life as a, in project delivery more straightforward?
So I'm not using project software currently in my role. However, historically, I found Jira really, really good. I think if you've got a good setup and you've got people who are invested in using it, I mean, it's always the same old adage, isn't it? Data in, data out. It's got to be good to get good out, good MI, and, for those who do agile, burn up, burn down charts and things. So I think, personally, I've enjoyed using Jira. I think planner boards, albeit very simple, can be very, very effective. And again, I think sometimes it depends on the complexity of the program. And also, with stakeholders and with workstream leads who aren't change professionals, if you kind of give them an MS project with, lots of complex kind of functionality and capability in it, and say to them, right, can you update this? They probably don't, they might not know where to start, because that's not their day-to-day bread and butter. Whereas I think sometimes giving people things that are relatively simplistic, and that's not to take away from people's ability to do things. I think it's we sometimes assume people know the tools that we use, so I think it's almost looking at tools that are appropriate to the audience as well in terms of the team that are using them. But yeah, Jira I found really works well.
Jira is the Marmite of the project delivery world.
It is.
You just either love it or you absolutely hate it. So let's see which camp you're in now. So, okay, next one. Biggest project management peeve. What is it that really?
Oh, that you're the PA who organises everything. That why is that meeting room not booked? Where are the minutes? Who's doing the action updates? I thought you were doing that. Yeah, being the administrator.
Project management manager as PA. That's your biggest peeve within it. Yes, we do much more than that. Okay, one piece of advice you'd give someone coming new into the industry, a new project manager. What advice would you give them?
I would suggest that they find a really good mentor, and they find somebody who is an experienced project or program manager, and just go and sit in some of their meetings and ask if they can join some of their project calls, or look at how they structured their plan. I think everybody has their own style and everybody has their own way of doing things, and I think that's really important. We're all individuals and we want to be able to bring who we are into our roles, but I think the program that I referenced previously, the program leader for that is someone who I still refer back to today, because of the way he works, of the way that I felt engaged with him. So I think having that mentor and finding a mentor is just so valuable when you're starting on your project journey. And I would say be curious as well, not be afraid to ask questions, and perhaps if you don't feel confident enough to ask the sponsor directly, maybe ask one of the the subject matter experts or the workstream lead in the area of which that program or project is going to benefit, just so you can get to understand a bit more about the why in the context. So yeah, I would say a mentor and not being afraid to ask questions.
Brilliant advice though. I mean, like you, I've got a number of program managers from my career who I still kind of think, what would they do in this situation? How would they deal with that? And that's it's great advice, I think, for anyone just starting out in project management. So just coming to the end now, I'm just going to summarize. I know I mentioned before about clarity, but I think it is so important. It's probably worth mentioning again, because I think it's all about that clarity of scope, of expectation, and of roles and responsibilities. I think if you can get those three nailed down on a project, you're in a pretty good place.
I think also, sorry, Adam, I would also add to that. I think the why. So the clarity of why are we doing this? Because without that, there's no scope, there's no expectation, there's no roles and responsibilities. I think fundamentally it starts with what's in it for the business, what's in it for the colleagues, and why are we actually doing this change? Yeah,
I mean there's two projects I won't go into now, but I often quote as being the best projects I've managed, and both of those had a really strong why, and the whole team was so engaged. you know, they would go above and beyond to get the thing done, and it was just as a program manager of those two working on those two projects, it was just a wonderful place to be, to have a really engaged team. But the why was absolutely central to that, to getting everyone on board. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely with you on that one. So yeah, just to wrap up, just a few announcements. So if you've enjoyed our conversation today, which I have hugely, Suzanne, then we have loads more webinars and sessions that we've got on our new YouTube channel that we're setting up, and you can find details of that and also our monthly newsletter on our LinkedIn page. So you can follow us, follow me. By all means, follow Suzanne as well on LinkedIn if you've enjoyed what she shared today. Yeah, and I'll just wrap up by saying thank you very much, Suzanne, for being the first on the new format. Hugely valuable lessons that you've shared with us. Really enjoyed our conversation. It's been great to have you on.
Oh, that's a pleasure. It's been really good to share it, and also, yeah, take me back to my old project days as well. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for inviting me on.